We're very fortunate to be part of this great learning of Daf Yomi together with the OU and all Daf. It's a tremendous honor and pleasure to introduce Rabbi Moshe Shwed. It's really the idea of all Daf, and we are all beneficiaries of the tremendous platform. Mitzvah Hashem, we should be zeicha more and more Torah together.
On behalf of the Orthodox Union, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this morning. On behalf of Rabbi Moshe Hauer, Executive Vice President, who's here, Rabbi Dr. Josh Joseph, Executive Vice President, who's not here, President Mitch Ader, who's also not here. Events like this don't happen on their own. The seed was planted a few months ago when I was in touch with both Yaakov Newman and Zevi Blumenfrucht, and we were thinking perhaps it's an opportunity to come to the Upper West Side, and we're thinking when would be a good time. And we looked at the calendar and we saw that there's a Siyum on Meseches Sotah taking place. It happened a few days ago. We figured let's come before Shavuos and perhaps join the community in a event. I would like to thank Rabbi Gettinger for graciously opening up this venue to host the Siyum as well. I would like to thank my friend, OU board member Ezra Friedberg, who was recently appointed to chair the Torah Commission, for joining us as well. Rabbi Moshe Brandsdorfer, Usher Tesser, and Alex Cook for filming and setting up all the technical aspects of this event. I'm not here to speak, but I thought that it would be appropriate to mention that today, Sunday, according to most, I think we pass in this way, 3,335 years ago, Klal Yisrael came to Har Sinai. Rosh Chodesh Sivan. And in the Pasuk in Parshas Yisro, the Torah tells us that he traveled from Refidim and they came to Har Sinai. And Rashi already brings Chazal. The Chazal say that Ma bi Asan, Ma Yitzi Asan Refidim was B'tshuva, Af bi Asan Har Sinai was B'tshuva. And the Mefarshim all ask, why is it important to let us know that they left Har Sinai? B'tshuva is another Chazal that say when they left, they were already preparing for Kabbalas HaTorah. When they got there, that's the time to be ready for Kabbalas HaTorah. Why is it important to let us know that when they were leaving already, that's when they were getting ready for Kabbalas HaTorah? And the Netziv on the Pasuk says that the famous story of Reb Chia, when he wanted to teach children Torah, says that he planted flax, and the flax grew, and he made nets, and he took the nets, and he caught deer, and he took the skin of the deer, and they had to work it to make it eligible for Sefer Torah. And the question there is, why didn't he just go buy skin that was ready to use for Kabbalas HaTorah? And the Netziv says that Reb Chia learned from this pasuk that as important as the actual Maimer Har Sinai, as the Kabbalas HaTorah, is the preparation and the tircha that goes into Kabbalas HaTorah. And that's why Reb Chia didn't just suffice with buying skin to write Sefer Torah. He went through all the preparation, all the tircha of preparing this for the Sefer Torah to be written on. So I think it's appropriate as we stand Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the day we came to Har Sinai, to spend a few minutes together and actually prepare with some tircha. Baruch Hashem, there's a good breakfast here, so it's not that difficult for Kabbalas HaTorah. The program will be, we're going to have a Siyum now. Eli Zicherman is making the Siyum. And then we will, followed by Kaddish, then Rabbi Hauer will speak, followed by a question-answer on the latest kashrus issues, challenges, questions with Rabbi Moshe Elephant, who'll be here in a few minutes. One last thing, and this is the most important, our Karas HaTov, to all the sponsors who took part in dedicating the Siyum. We thank each one of them for their sponsorship, and Mitzvah Hashem, they should all be zeicha to have much bracha and atzlacha, continue supporting the Torah that gets learned through these wonderful apps.
Finish off with the Sotah, then we finish as Shemes. Shemes had a bottle of Nova, the year's fat. We're going to have the Gemara talks about all these, and the Tanum, when they passed away, was was lost along with them. So the Gemara says, Mishmesh le batal anuba v'yischet. So, I'm going to be honest with the Chage. Sorry, I can't see a thing here. Like, give me a second. Sorry. I'm going to be honest with the Tana. Loitet na anuba, dekanu. Don't say anuba, that anuba is completely gone, because I'm here. Actually, the Ben Ishchai asks, how's it possible to say that when the Rebbe passed away, Anuba was completely gone? We do see in multiple places, throughout Shas, they're talking about different Anuba, that there was Anuba. So the Ben Ishchai says that the concept of Melicha and the Ashiras the Rebbe had, and to have Anuba on that level, the fact that he witnessed on himself that he didn't have Anuba from even his little finger didn't have Anuba, so that alone, for that kind of Anuba was bottled. It was never like that. There was never such a thing. And based on that, the famous question on the next Gemara is, which is Umar Rabbi Yosef the Tana, don't say there's no Anuba anymore because I'm here. So the famous question is, first of all, how did he say it on himself, and what's behind it? So the Ben Ishchai basically says that the story, the Gemara in Hoyre says that when they were debating who they should make the Rav, the Sheshiv and Bobel, there were two options. There was either Rabbi Yosef or Rabbi, and the question was which one they choose. So the Master says that Rabbi Yosef was Sinai, and Rabbi was Oikahara. And the Chacham of Mitzvah said that they chose Rabbi Yosef, who was Sinai. And the fact was he didn't want to do it. He didn't take it on himself. He gave it away to Rabbi. For 22 years, Rabbi was the Shiva, and after he passed away, only then did he do it. So it says that while Rabbi was the Shiva, he was sitting there. He learned that he didn't do anything. The Gemara brings the whole thing over there. That he didn't do anything that resembled any type of melicha. So Rabbi Yosef was really saying, don't learn Pshat that Anuba means like we just learned Pshat in the Rebbe, that because he was such a big godless and he didn't do anything, that's why he's a Anuba. Because I had the same situation, and I don't have an sign that should say that I'm an Anuba. So what he's saying really is, in Yosef Tana, don't learn Pshat and Anuba the way it is. They can't, because you're putting me in a bad spot, in a bad sign. Had nog Sotah, dat naar lach. Zegt de Sotah, dat nog een zacht naar lach. Zegt de Sotah, snap maar nog aan de lijn, dan dus had nog zegt de Sotah, had nog dat nog zegt de Sotah, dat nog zacht naar lach. Zegt de Sotah, zegt nog aan de lijn, dan dus had nog zegt de Sotah, wat nog dat nog zegt de Sotah, dat naar lach. Dan staan we nog zegt de Sotah, zegt naar lach. Dan met denk aan dus hier het van ik had nooit hij niet bij zijn staat er rasten zijn die maar zelf zijn moet niet nooit maar hoe gaan we rumba op nacht op groeien op op dag op op als de op doet op haar nooit maar zo we vinden wie vier soms bij zo niet nacht het zijn zo bij zo kleine smeren om te zeggen maar buiten gemeente te zeggen dat hier liep het om gekregen maar hij was nooit les gedeeg kwam voor zo'n goeie gaat wel nooit dan gekregen om de mensen heel goed mooi de nacht op niet gaat nooit hij nou zou ik elke meer بس ما بلغت خلق ميش كونس شو المشكلة ما مشكلة مشكلة تبغى طيب أنا مشكلة تبغى متعلمون أنا بعمل كم مسخة بعمل هم كم مسخة نقول تمام بس نقول تنخان مبو بعمل بس نبغى شاك عشان ما أعطى هم تريد نبغى شاك عن شد من من يختم ما يبغى من يختم بخ يرد من يخلي نوي أنا هاي شمس الثاني سام زت الصيد كان تزين الحاسك زت السوق ما خير من سام من ضمن الأمر ليش مبلاص كم مسكته سام تسيخه بهذا خسكت من مقوم سميت الخم يعمل لي زاري ثم شرطت من بيزاري من زي هذا دولا مسكين بي مسرح ده قويس شاب خيتش من كله بكتوي هيس سيخ كبير بي مخ وسير فوش لا اسلام اويفن بمينا اسمه له اوش بخوبه ده ادنا اوش لميت عندنا دول سام بشوره قال شمال غابه خيول مع سالة سوي يوصل أم دي خاي أم لبنا كاتب بشلاين شكله هاي خو بيجابه ما كان بيخون بشلاين شكله هاي خو بيجابه ما كان بيخون أجر تسوي بيخون دي شمال أس بيعمل كيش بيجي ما فيش يكون بيعمل كل مشي ده خاي في ما كاتب بتسوي بكون في مهمين عاش ما يلعب بكون ما يبوش بس ناس ده بس خلاص ما كيش بيجي بس شو تقول لك مش بيعمل مهمين سوى كل ده كيس دام كمان بس كم براش تفضل خلاص عارف ساي عشان بخلي كل خاي يقدر يبدا بكل مش معي بعد مهمين عاش مش ما كاتب لايك وكل يسوي مهمين شو نقول لك بس شو لايك وكل يسوي مهمين.
Thank you and Mazel Tov, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge the participation and support of the Rabbanim in the neighborhood. I know Sunday mornings are difficult for Rabbanim. We work Monday through Friday. Rabbanim work Sunday is one of their busiest days. So thank you particularly for Rabbi Gettinger and Rabbi Stein for being here. And I believe we have participation of Daf Yomi learners and Magidei Shir from many of the shuls in the neighborhood. So I appreciate that as well. I'd like to acknowledge Rabbi Limelech Friedman from Williamsburg, who says a Yiddish shir on the Old Daf app, for coming and participating as well. Yasher Koach.
It's really a tremendous honor to introduce Rabbi Moshe Hauer. Here in the neighborhood, we know Rabbi Hauer a bit through his son, Yisachar Hauer in the back, a member of the Chavar HaKollel. So I think the best way to introduce Rabbi Hauer is from a pasuk in Parshas Yisro, which is relevant to today's date. The pasuk says, "Bayom hazeh bo midbar Sinai." It was on this day when Klal Yisrael came. So Rashi says, what's the pshat in the pasuk? Bayom hazeh. So Rashi says, "B'chol yom yu beinecha kechadashim." That every single time a person goes to learn Torah, it's present, it's current, it's relevant to us. It's as if it's happening again and again. The kasha on the Rashi is that this pasuk by Yom Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai is on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. That's not the right place to put this din. B'chol Yom Yu B'necha Kechadashim. B'chol Yom Yu B'necha Kechadashim is a din in Limud HaTorah. Limud HaTorah takes place only when we actually receive the Torah. Why does it say it here? And Vayter Shver in the Rashi is that we know Chazal tell us this from a different place. It says, Asher Noichi Mitzavcha Hayoim Al Levavecha. So Chazal darshan Hayoim V'chol Yom Yu B'necha Kechadashim. So why do you need two different Mekarim to say the same thing? Bayom Hazeh and Hayoim. So it could be that the idea is that besides for Limud HaTorah, every single time that we come together Ba'achdos of Klal Yisrael, that's the prerequisite to how we're going to learn Torah. It's one thing to look at Torah as one is experiencing it, as one is living it, as one is learning the words, to realize that it's new and that it's current and that it's novel in front of us. But it's another idea to realize that we only have the koyach to learn Torah when we're ba'achtos. Vayom hazeh mo b'midbar Sinai. The koyach for Klal Yisrael to be makabel the Torah came from Rosh Chodesh Sivan, when they all came together ba'achtos. On that day there was no Limud HaTorah. The Gemara says, Mishum chul shod urcha. They didn't learn one word of Torah that day. But that itself, that there was an avodah of bringing Klal Yisrael together, that's not only a historical past event. B'chol yom yu b'necha kechadashim. It's a current, relevant avodah. And only when we appreciate that avodah are we able to then move on to the importance of Limud HaTorah as well. So we are so grateful to Rabbi Hauer as someone who is exactly this point. He's a person who brings Yidden together. The great umbrella of the OU is a tremendous unifying force. And we can all testify to that point, that in some way we have a karas hatov to the OU, we look up to the OU, and it all starts from the top down, and it starts from Rabbi Hauer. Without further ado, a tremendous kavod and honor to have him address us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate very much the warm words, and Rishus, Rabbi Gettinger, the Mardas, Rishus, the other Rabbanim from the area who are here, Rishus al the Laimdim, all those who learned to Daf Hayomi. It's really a privilege for to be here, to be able to participate in yet, Baruch Hashem, another celebration of Torah, another celebration of Torah on the day that Bo Midbar Sinai, and those ideas are uppermost in everybody's mind. I want to share with you this morning an idea of two models. The Messiah, Zichterman, alluded to that Gemara in the end of Harius, where the Gemara speaks about the Sinai va'ikar Horim. Two different models. And as we think really about the achdus of Klal Yisrael around Torah, and we think about kavod HaTorah, and we think about how we ourselves are able to develop through Torah, it's significant for us to realize that there's a model being celebrated here this morning, a significant model. And there's another model which it adds its own layer of complexity, and that's really what I want to talk about with you here today. The Gemara, the last Mishnah in Sotah, says twice. It says Mishemes Rabbi Akiva Batul Kavod Torah, and a couple of lines later it says Mishemes Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken Batul Kavod Torah. Everyone notices this problem. Rashi already addresses it. How do you say about two different people in two different periods? And of course, Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken was well before Rabbi Akiva, appears later in the Mishnah. How do you say about both of them that when they both, each of them died, Batul Kavod Torah, then Kavod Torah had a resurgence? So Rashi stops on this, and Rashi says that the story of Mishemes Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken Batul Kavod Torah is that which the Gemara tells famously in the beginning of the second parak of Megillah. That until the time of Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, we would all be standing to learn Torah. Like V'anaychi Amaditi Bahar, Kavod Torah means that you stand up for the Torah. But then Yorda Chulsha La'olam, in the days of Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, people became weaker. It was harder for them to be able to do this. So people started to sit. Eventually they started to sit and drink coffee. Eventually they started to do more and more. Chulsha La'olam Baruch Hashem. But that was the Kavod Torah. We sat, and we learned. It even became the expression. That was the Kavod Torah which was lost. But there's a different kind of a Kavod Torah. People sometimes say, a wise person once told me, a wise person who got a lot of kavod, wherever he went, people stood up for him. They honored him. They gave him speeches of introduction. But he said, it's much more meaningful for me that rather than people do the, so to speak, the trappings of honor, that they actually care about what I think, about what I have to say, about what I have to contribute. Says Rashi, the Kavod Torah of Rabbi Akiva was because Rabbi Akiva was dairesh al kol tag v'tag, on every little extra extension of the letters that are found in the Sifrei Torah, tilei tilim shel halachas. The Kavod Torah which was afforded by Rabbi Akiva was a kavod to the word. He wanted to extract from every bit of the word of Hashem another idea, another insight, another thought. The kavod of the Torah itself. And that went by the wayside with Misas Rabbi Akiva. Nobody was able to do the same. To us, even looking at that idea of being dairish, tilei tilim shel halachas, is obscure. In fact, it's written in Kadmainim that part of the reason why we were mevater so readily, the Gemara says in Gittin that we don't have to read, we can read from Chumashim, which don't have tagim, right? They're just block letters. We read from regular Svarim because we no longer are dairish, tilei tilim shel halachas. We don't extract everything from everywhere. So it's a different picture. Now, we're still in the Yemei HaSfira. Most of us, in one way or the other, almost all minhagim, not all, but almost all minhagim have by now, by Rosh Chodesh Sivan, are a little bit slowed down with the minhagei avelos. But we can't overlook the fact that at the same time, when we speak about Rabbi Akiva being the champion of Kavod Torah, and of course as well Rabbi Akiva being the champion of V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, but we are also in a period where we recall that the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva loy nahagu kavod ze lo ze. And it's an amazing thing. The person who was the seat of Kavod Torah, the person who was the seat of Bein Adam L'Chaveru, but kavod ze lo ze, respect one for the other, for the Talmidim, was something which was missing amongst the students of Rabbi Akiva. What's the pshat? There are many who have asked this question, and there are many who have answered this question. So I want to suggest that perhaps at the core of this lies an approach of a difference between the derech, in a certain sense, of Rabbi Akiva, the derech of Rabbi Akiva, which may be the derech of the Daf HaYomi, and another derech. First, just a simple answer to the question. The keystone, perhaps, of the answer to the question is that the Gemara in Bava Metzia says that the Talmidei Chachamim in Bavel, they used to be oimdim zeh bifnei zeh. They stood up for each other. They showed kavod from one to another like a rebbe to a talmid, even though they were chavrusas, even though they were learning with each other. Rashi says that the basis for that they were oimid zeh bifnei zeh, it's a Gemara in Bava Metzia, Daf Lamed Gimel, says Rashi, that the idea was that the reason why they were kaireya, Aymed Zeh Bifnei Zeh and kaireya Zeh Bifnei Zeh, like Talmud L'Rav. I'm sorry, I'll tell you what here it is, yes. Says Rashi, L'fi shayu yoshvin Talmud Beis HaMedrash Yachad. They sat together in the Beis HaMedrash, u'makshin u'mefarkin. They asked on each other, and they answered to each other. So they were all learning from each other. So first of all, what you see over here is that there was a bechina, an aspect of kavod zeh lo zeh, which, absent that, is not a chesaron of bein adam l'chavera v'hafta l'reach l'kamaycha. They treated each other like their rebbeim, like their teachers, because each one dismantled the other one's thinking and then rebuilt it. They had arguments in learning. They talked in learning in such a way that it translated into such a kavod zeh lo zeh. They saw the other person as their rebbe, as a result. That's the nagu kavod zeh lo zeh that was there in Bavel, that was not present amongst the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. Why would it not be present? So the Gemara says, we have a whole series of Gemaras which shows that in Eretz Yisrael, which is where Rabbi Akiva was, they didn't learn like that. They didn't learn by asking kashas on each other and providing answers. One raya, sort of, would be what the Messiah just said, and he pointed it out very carefully, that when Rabbah and Rav Yosef, when they were discussing who would be the Rosh Yeshiva in Bavel, where did they send the Shaila? They sent it to Eretz Yisrael. And from Eretz Yisrael, they said, Sinai Adif. Sinai is not Kushyas Upirukim. It's not questions and answers. It's not challenging. It's a delivery of the Messiah. It's not conflict. It's not Oiker Horim, V'teichnan Zeba Zeb Sfara. It's not conflict and argument one with the other. It's straight. In Eretz Yisrael, that's what they valued. And it's mafurish in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, a famous Gemara, where the Gemara speaks about Noyam and Chayvlim, and it says that in Eretz Yisrael, Talmidei Chachamim were manimim zeh lo zeh. They were pleasant to each other. In Chutz La'aretz, they were antagonistic to each other. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't sound like what we do right now. It sounds like a little bit like a role reversal. Like we're these nice, passive Americans that manage to get along with each other. In Eretz Yisrael, it's a bit different, but the Gemara says that was the quality of Torah's Eretz Yisrael. It was manimim zeh lo zeh b'halacha, and it's the same language. It's fascinating. It's pervasive. It's in fact two Gemaras over here in Bava Metzia, two other Gemaras here in Bava Metzia that bring this out. You have, of course, the famous Gemara that Reb Zera, when he went to Eretz Yisrael, he fasted. The Gemara said, he fasted 100 times so he should forget the Talmud Bavli. You know the famous story with the Chazon Ish and Rav Herzog. You know that story? It's a great story. When Rav Herzog came to Eretz Yisrael, so after a little while, he had a connection to the Chazon Ish, and he met the Chazon Ish, and they were talking and learning, and Rav Herzog gave a krechts. He said, when I was in Dublin, there wasn't a Tosfos in Shas that I couldn't just recall. He says, now I'm here, and the Oil Harabonos, whatever it is, I can't, I'm losing it. He complained to the Chazon Ish. So the Chazon Ish said, if only Rav Zera would have known. Rav Zera fasted 100 Tanesim to forget the Torah of Chutz La'aretz. He could have just become the chief rabbi. But the Gemara says he did it. Why? Says the Gemara, so that the Torah of Bavel shouldn't distract him. So, Vasak Rashi, what does Mekechle Nitrudei? So he says, Amoyron Sheberetz Yisrael Hayu B'nei Machlokes. The Amoyron Eretz Yisrael didn't argue. V'noichem zelazeh kishemen kedamina b'Sanhedrin. They were easy with each other, like we say in Sanhedrin. Umiyashvenas hatamim b'leikushis upirukim. They answered. They explained things without asking and answering, without the conflict, the cheref pifiyos of arguments in Torah. They did it all b'darchei noyam. They did it b'darchei noyam, and he said, now I'm going to learn Torah in Eretz Yisrael, and I have in my mind all the kashas, all the terutzim, all the back and forth. I need to clear the deck so I can learn in this sweet and straightforward way. And of course, we see this one page earlier in a very famous Gemara in Bava Metzia. What's that? It's the Gemara of Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. In the Gemara of Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish, so of course you remember that, so Rish Lakish died because of some tzarasayin of Rav Yochanan or something, some critique, and the Gemara says that Rav Yochanan was crying over Rish Lakish. Hechanat bar Lakisha, Hechanat bar Lakisha. So what did they do? So they said, we're going to give him somebody else. He lost his Talmud, his Chavrusa. We're going to give him somebody else. And so they brought him Rebbe Elazar ben Padas, the Mechaded and Shmaite. Rebbe Elazar ben Padas, who was so fluent in his learning. And he sat in front of him, and everything Rav Yochanan said, he brought him a Tanya de Messiah. He brought him a proof. What's that derech? That's the derech of the Tanoim of Eretz Yisrael. So he said, At kebar Lakisha. Bar Lakisha ki avi amina milsa havim actually esim v'arba kushyasu v'arkinu esim v'arba pruke u'mela rav chashmaitza. He says, with Rish Lakish, I had a taste of a different kind of learning. One which you, the greats of Eretz Yisrael, don't provide for me. And that is that he challenged me, that he asked me kashas. He says, I don't need you to tell me that I'm right. I need you to show me where I'm wrong. That was his taina. The Rav Chan Shmaitzer, the growth of Torah that he wanted, the sudden and significant growth of Torah that he experienced with Rish Lakish, that he didn't find with this person. One could even say that, the Gemara that leads to it was that Rabbi Yochanan said to Rish Lakish on a Mishnah in Kalim, Listim b'listiusa yada. Right, you're a bandit. You know the story of what makes a sword. And Rish Lakish was insulted. He was recalling his old days. But Rabbi Yochanan was saying, you have the cherev of Milchamta Shel Torah. You're a warrior. When I learn with you, I'm learning with a warrior who brought your fighting spirit into the Beis Medrash. And there's something which is incredibly exciting about that. It's transformative. You learn something revolutionary. Somebody changes the way you thought a moment ago. So you have Sinai, where people teach you Torah more and more. Nobody's challenging you. They're just giving you. They're giving you more and more of the words of Torah. And then you have the Aiker Harim, the Techan Zebazeh, that everything that's said is fought with, is challenged. In the days of Rabbi Akiva gave covet to Torah. He gave covet to the words of Torah. Rabbi Akiva wasn't about revolutionary change through Torah. He was about evolutionary change. And how do you know? What's the raya? So there's a very famous raya, and then I'm going to ask you a question which I think you'll say is the second raya. The very famous raya is what brought Rabbi Akiva to the Beis HaMedrash? Avonim shachaku mayim. Right? He saw water, a steady drip that was dripping on a rock. And there was an indentation in the rock. Could you point to a moment where that indentation was made? Was there a revolution? Was there some point where somebody said something, a lightning bolt that changed that rock? You would never be able to see it. Right? Even with our cameras, that slow down you'd watch it the whole time and you see it. Like, when would you see that? You'd have to take decades of frames and string them together in order to be able to see an impact. That's a darchei noyam. That's not a challenge. That's building. I have a kasha for you. Everybody knows the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva went to learn. His wife sent him to learn. He went to learn for 12 years. After 12 years, he came back. Neighbor, I wish he'd go for another 12. He comes back 12 years later with 24,000 Talmidim. How many Talmidim did he come back with after 12 years? Do you ever wonder, presumably, he built it up? They didn't open the mirror with 8,000 Talmidim. They started with the kaimetz. They started with a few people, and slowly but surely. And you could track it over time, so it goes from 100 to 200 to 400 to 800 to 1,000. Slowly but surely. Rabbi Akiva, 12 years, he comes back alone. 24 years, he comes back with 24,000 Talmidim. Isn't that actually, you might say that's actually revolution, not evolution. But there was a tipping point that came after gradual and continuous. Rabbi Akiva didn't change things dramatically. He just, b'darchei noyam, continued and grew. And there's another way, and that's Talmud de Bavel. And excuse me that I'm doing this, but I have to share this with you because this note here to me is shocking in how it presents sort of like a completeness of the picture of Torah. So we see, what have we seen? We've seen that in Bavel, people fought with each other. They changed each other's minds. Chavrusas weren't bringing riots to each other, where one said, like Rav Yochanan said to his new Talmud, I don't need you. I know that I'm okay, and I'm not going to stand up for you. You're not my Rebbe. But in Bavel, it was like Rav Yochanan was shlokish. They fought with each other. They transformed each other. They had no choice but, in a certain sense, to be mechabed each other. Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. Listen to a Rambam. I know it will sound like it's from the moon, but it's amazing when you think about it. It's a Rambam, famous Rambam, in Hilchas Avodah Zarah, Perek Aleph, where it tells the story of Avram Avinu. Where did Avram Avinu start off? Bavel. It wasn't quite, or Kazdim. He started off in the kingdom of Nimrod, which was Bavel. Avram Avinu was the one who left Migdal Bavel. Right? Dvarim achadim. So he started off in Bavel. Kivin shehikir v'yada, when Avram Avinu recognized HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hischil lahashiv tshuvos al bnei Kazdim v'larech din imohem. He started to debate with the people of Ur-Kasdim about matters of faith. You're not doing the right thing. You're wrong. V'shiber hatzlamim, and he smashed the idols. V'hischil lohidia la'am shein roi la'avoid ela la'loikaha oilam v'loi roi l'ishtachves v'la'akriv v'l'nasech. You should only be serving the Rabbeinu Shalom. V'roi la'abed v'l'shaber kol hatzures. You should destroy everything else because people get confused by anything else. Avram Avinu won the arguments, he won the debates, he overwhelmed them with his proofs. And what was the result? Bikesh HaMelech L'Horga, they wanted to kill him. And Avram Avinu had to leave. This was not the period of Avram Avinu's success in being Makarev people to Torah. So he ran, and he left Eretz Yisrael. And what did he do in Eretz Yisrael? Starting really in Charan, he started to call out to people, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem, to let them know there's one God. V'loi roi laved, you should worship Him. And he traveled from place to place, and he gathered people me'ir le'ir, ad shigil eretz Canaan v'ukayrei, till he arrived to Canaan, still teaching, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem elokei le'olam. When people came to him and they asked him, he told each person, where's that expression come from? From Leila Seder, right? From the Mishnah and Arvei Psachim. Know every person and teach them according to their way, until he brought the person to the Derech HaEmes, till thousands and multitudes assembled with him. What's the Rambam saying? Rambam saying that Avram Avinu had two ways of teaching. He had one way of teaching in Bavel, and that way was confrontational, argumentative, revolutionary, telling people you're all wrong. And he had another way of teaching in Eretz Yisrael, which was he taught them the truth. They asked him, he taught them in a way. And slowly but surely, they learned and they grew. Evolution, not revolution. It's two ways. Rav Meir Shapira founded the Daf HaYomi. He was a remarkable personality. He's a person whose impact on the world, the way we have it, the world of Torah that exists, is immeasurable. Rav Meir Shapira, as we know, of course, had one project called Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, which was reversing the notion of Batla Kavod HaTorah in a certain way, that people should stand up for the honor of Torah. You understand that Rav Meir Shapira stepped into a world of Torah that was bleeding profusely, that was losing adherents, one after another. And he had a choice, like any Manig Yisrael had a choice. And the choice was that he could get up there and explain to all those people why they were wrong, why communism was wrong, why Renaissance intellectualism was wrong, why all of those things, why alle Bicher were filled with Sheker v'Chazav. All the books that were tumbling out of Chekom, of Yeshiva Bachrim, and children of Bnei Torah v'Yirei Hashem, he could explain to them why they were all wrong. And instead, what he chose to do was something which was revolutionary, but really evolutionary. He said, we're going to be Mechabed Torah. We're going to be Mechabed Torah. We're going to hold it up on a pedestal. We're going to build for its yeshiva a palace, a beautiful place. Chachmei Lublin, my goodness, they picked up your laundry at your door of your dorm room. For those of us who learned in yeshiva, for some of us the word laundry is even a chiddush. They picked up the laundry. I understand it didn't last long, but that was the original plan. It was kavod malachim. It was elevate. You don't need revolution. Pick up. Darchei noyam. Darchei noyam. Darchei noyam. And then he looked at Klal Yisrael. And you could walk into Batei Midrashos where people are arguing with each other. And there's something which is incomparable to that. Talmud Bavli. Kushyas. Upirukim. To have Milchamta Shel Torah, to be transformed in that way. But that didn't make it that today we have, everywhere you go, you see people who are no longer in that Beis Medrash carrying around a Gemara in their talis bag, a Gemara under their arm. Rav Meir Shapira said, I'm going to bring something else, a daf yomi. Now, I'm sure many of you are here because you attended daf yomi shir. Everybody knows that in a daf yomi shir, if you start with Kushes Upirukim, after the shir, the Rebbe is going to politely come over to you and say, we got away, we managed to finish the daf today, but if you keep doing that, we're history. There's no Kushes Upirukim in daf yomi, right? Sometimes the Rebbe asks a kasha, the Rebbe gives a teretz, masa u'mata, a dynamic thing. If you're zeicha to have a 3-hour daf yomi shir, go for it. But for the rest of us, rayas. Only rayas are welcome. Right? We build on each other. And the notion and the idea that he made, like Parshas HaShavua brings together Klal Yisrael, now a Blat Gemara brings together Klal Yisrael. And you might say, but I don't know it. I learned a day and a day and a day, and I finished. Now we were Messiah, Meseches Sotah, and I remember the first sugya in Sotah because actually it's repeated, sort of, the Eidim, we have a little reminder, and Rashi says, I explained it already, as if you remember, right, on the Beis of Beis, in the first parak, we keep going, and we could somehow or another say, what is it? It's not like Milchanta Shel Torah. It's not the same. And it's not the same. But it's Avonim Shachaku Mayim. It's that drop and that drop of water. The Noyam. The Noyam. Should that be it? Frankly, I don't think it should be it. I think we also have to somehow have a little chayvlim. Chazal tell us we mourn because we don't treat each other like Rebbeim. To some degree, we also need to revolutionize each other. And perhaps in a community like this, a community of serious, intelligent people, where Torah and commitment to Torah learning is so strong, maybe not in place of this beautiful nayam that's moving people along through another daf and adding and transforming. But maybe there's also room for people chaverim. I always dreamed, and never accomplished, that, we could have like a zman, like in a city. This man, all the non-daf yomi learners, all the non-daf yomi shiurim, we're learning Ketzad Mevorchim. And the people bump into each other in the street, and they talk and learning about it. And they're holding in it, and they're holding in it. There's room for both. There's room to be Aiker Harim V'Teicham Zebozeh B'Svara. It will add, in a sense, to our Kavod Zelozeh. But for now, for the moment, on the day that Ba'u Midbar Sinai, we can savor the incredible Kavod HaTorah, the incredible Nayam of everybody together, growing and learning, growing a daf after a daf. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu continue, all of us, the Talmidim, the children of Rav Meir Shapira, the Kavod HaTorah, the Ne'imus, which he brought forward in all of us. May we be zeicha to see it grow. It's a privilege to be with you to celebrate this special Master.
I promise to get you out of here in 20 minutes or so. It's a big schluss this morning for us on the west side to welcome Rabbi Moshe Elephant, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Coordinator of a small organization you may have heard of called OU Kosher. He oversees over 1,000 employees who are involved in the certification and monthly inspection of over 13,000 plants in 105 countries. In addition to managing OU Kosher, Rabbi Elephant is a world-renowned Maggid Shir, and his daily shiurim on all daf are followed by thousands of daily listeners from across the globe. So I'd like to call up Rabbi Elephant and just ask him a few questions regarding kashrus. I don't know if we have a second mic. Sharon? Okay, perfect. Someone's missing car keys. They're over here. Shane asked them. All right. So to piggyback off of what Rabbi Howard was talking about Torah of Eretz Yisrael, if we could focus on the interaction between kashrus in Chutz La'aretz and kashrus in Eretz Yisrael. So I'd like to, many people have the perception that the OU is an American kashrus organization. But I saw in a recent interview that you gave that in fact the OU is a global organization with a very strong presence in Eretz Yisrael. Currently there are over 200 factories certified in Eretz Yisrael by the OU, including Osem, Elite, Strauss, Carmel Wines, a long list of manufacturing facilities. So when an Orthodox Jew from Eretz Yisrael travels to New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, or really any major US city, I think I would like to think that kashrus organizations in America have made it very easy for Orthodox Yidden to find kosher food establishments to eat at. It's fairly obvious where one can eat. So my question is, at least for myself, I find it very confusing when I go to Eretz Yisrael, let's say not in Yerushalayim, let's say in some of the outer cities, to find where someone who keeps an OU standard of kashrus in the United States or an Orthodox from standard of kashrus in the United States, there are multiple kashrus in Eretz Yisrael. So I guess my question is, why is it so confusing? And is there anything that the OU can do now to help Americans who are traveling to Eretz Yisrael to filter through that enigma of the different kashrus agencies in Eretz Yisrael?
Interesting way to start the conversation. So, kashrus in Israel is extremely complicated. You are correct. After having been involved with kashrus in Israel for close to 30 years, I have come to the understanding that when somebody comes in the United States to the supermarket to buy food, someone chooses an eatery where they want to eat food. So there are hashgachas that we're comfortable with. There may be hashgachas that you're not comfortable with because of their standards, and based on that, that's where you choose to buy, that's where you choose to eat. When you go to the supermarket in Israel, it's like going to the elections. And the food you buy isn't only based on the kashrus of the food, it also is connected to the philosophy of the rabbi who's giving the hashgacha. It's connected to, is he a chassidisha, is he not a chassidisha, what chassidisha is he? And that, of course, is a very complicated situation. And to answer your question, I don't really have a good answer because, and Rabbi Howard and I do different parts at the OU. He's more involved in politics, etc., and I'm involved in kashrus. So I'm not really the one to state an opinion. I'm certainly not stating the OU's opinion. But in the United States, what makes kashrus successful is that it's not political, and it's not at all involving the government. We're not a government agency. The government could not get involved in kashrus, even if they wanted to get involved in kashrus. We have here separation of church and state. In Israel, the Rabbanut is a governmental agency. And because they're a governmental agency, they're bound to government rules. So one of the rules that really ties the hands of the Rabbanut in Israel is many times, I'll ask the audience what they think. How would you define, if somebody asked you, what is the definition, what in your mind characterizes a good hechsher? What's a good hechsher? How do you decide what's a good hechsher, what's a poor hechsher?
Independence.
What?
Independence.
Independence, that's a good answer. That's a great answer. So I'll tell you how I define independence. A hashgacha that could say no. A hashgacha that if an application comes to the OU, we don't have to take every application. We decide based on fair criteria that when we will or won't take a hashgacha. We also have the ability to terminate a relationship. If we feel that there's a company or whatever who isn't following the rules, we are legally allowed in our contract, and we exercise it whenever necessary, to terminate the relationship. The Rabbanut does not have that ability. Anybody who comes to the Rabbanut for hashgacha, whether it's implicit or explicit, is going to get a hashgacha. So when you're in a situation where you're going to have to give the hashgacha, you're already in a much weaker position. And also, because you're going to have to give the hashgacha, and because you're going to have to satisfy everybody, the way you satisfy everybody is by reaching the lowest common denominator.
Why can't the Rabbanut terminate?
Because if they terminate, they're going to be taken to court. Was I really deserving to terminate? It becomes very complicated. So, and also, you'll end up having in your town a restaurant that doesn't have hashgacha. So you as the Rav of the town, have a real challenge. Do you want to have a restaurant in your town that is not kosher? Or do you want to have a restaurant in town that's kosher with a weak hashgacha? I'm going to give you two examples. About 2 years ago, there was a terrible, terrible story in Rishon LeZion, where there was a Fleischiger restaurant. And there was a girl who went to the Fleischiger restaurant for a meal. This girl was allergic to milk, but there was ice cream on the menu. She knew, I don't even think she was a religious person, but she knew that she can't go wrong with ice cream in a Fleischiger restaurant because it's Fleischig's. So the ice cream must be parv. And she ordered ice cream. But what happened with the ice cream? The waiter went into the kitchen to bring ice cream for this customer, and there was none. No problem. He went next door to the Makolet and bought dairy ice cream. This is a true story. It's a terrible story because she passed away. Because there was no mashgiach. If there had been a mashgiach, this could have never possibly happened. So the OU, I'm not saying nothing ever goes wrong. Believe me, plenty goes wrong. But this white beard testifies that. But we couldn't have had that because we have a mashgiach that would have never let that happen. But the Rav of that town, if he would insist that every restaurant have a mashgiach, he can never get away with it. And then I'll tell you another story that I was at. I'll not use any names, obviously. Many years ago, there was a very, very prominent company in Israel that wanted to get OU supervision. The company is up north in Israel, and I was in Israel. I traveled up north. We stayed in a very nice hotel in that city up north Israel, and we met with the leadership of that company, with the Rav of that town, and the person who was involved with the OU at that time in Israel, and myself. And we were told in this hotel you could eat. We were still concerned, so I ate a piece of fish that was grilled in a piece is covered in silver foil. That's not the important part of the story. But everybody else around the table had a fleischiger meal, had a meat meal. After the meal was served, the waiters came around and asked, does anybody want coffee? There were some individuals who said, yes, we'd like to have a coffee. They brought some coffees to the table with real milk. With real milk, after a fleischiger meal. The Rav of the town was at the table with us. The Rav at the town was sitting there. He's sitting in front of a person from the OU, and they're serving a milchige coffee after a fleischiger meal. And you know what he did? He said nothing. My mashgiach turned over the table, and he didn't even work there. But that's the problem of Israel, where the Rabbanim are limited in what they can do. And that's why there's a problem with kashrus in Israel. The issue, however, is, so why can't somebody get involved? The reason why nobody can get involved is because, as I said, The OU goes only when we are invited. Why would somebody invite the OU that we should make their life miserable? That we're going to come in, I'm going to tell them you need to have a mashgiach tamidi. We're going to come with all sorts of rules. We're going to say that the mashgiach has to have the keys to the kitchen, when currently they could get away. So yes, you're going to come to Israel, and you're not going to have where to eat. So they'll live without you. It's not worth it. And it's all about dollars and cents.
Thank you. That was very informative. So speaking about getting invited places, I've seen you in other interviews talk about how it's on the consumer to try to push organizations to get certified by the OU. So let's bring it back to America. Has the OU been invited to Starbucks coffee yet to certify restaurants in Jewish areas? And what should a person do to buy a coffee if they're traveling on the road and there's no kosher establishment? Can you walk into a Starbucks and buy a coffee?
So really you asked two separate questions. The question is, have we been asked by Starbucks to ever certify Starbucks? The answer is no, and probably the reason is because we wouldn't certify a retail operation that's open on Shabbos. So a Starbucks that would become OU certified would have to agree to close for Shabbos, close for Yom Tov. And again, it's all about economics. And they're making a calculation. I'm going to get this many religious customers, and I'm going to lose Shabbos as a day of business. There's a bakery that we certified that has many different locations throughout the city, throughout the boroughs in New Jersey, and they came to us and they said they got a wonderful opportunity where the owner of a property in Times Square wanted him to open up a bakery there. And he says, I'd love you to do it, but the owner said, this is a property that I can't afford to not be open on Shabbos. But we said we won't certify a place that's open on Shabbos. So for that location, he took a different hashgacha. So a Starbucks, because it's economics, he's not willing to give up the income of Shabbos. And we're not willing to certify something that's open on Shabbos. So that's why the likelihood of a Starbucks location becoming OU certified, very unlikely. Number two, your question about going to Starbucks that's not certified. So this is one of my topics. I'll ask a question. We have an audience mostly of men, but think about what your wife would say. You have a fleishige dishwasher, a dairy dishwasher, doesn't make a difference. And last night, after Shabbos, your wife ran the meat dishwasher. She opens up the dishwasher after it runs, and lo and behold, you know what she finds? A milchige spoon in the dishwasher. Tell me what happens in your house. I know what would happen in my house. Either, first of all, it'd certainly be my fault. But after we establish that it's my fault, even though I never put anything into the dishwasher, the next thing would be Tisha B'Av all over again. A milchige spoon in the fleishige dishwasher, we have to throw out the dishwasher, buy a new one tomorrow morning. And I actually, of course, that's completely halachically not required, but I applaud the attitude. I applaud the attitude that people are so serious about kashrus, especially the women more than the men. But what is going on in Starbucks? They're not only serving coffee with milk or coffee with parva milk. They're making sandwiches that are chazer, that are real treif. And where are they washing the utensils of all of those different foods that they're preparing? They don't have a separate kosher dishwasher. They have one dishwasher that they use for the coffee equipment and for the other food, for the other equipment that they're making. Would anybody in this room ever tolerate that they should eat from vessels, from spoons and forks and knives and whatever, pots and pans that are used on a regular basis, the same dishwasher for mamish treif. Can anybody think of that? Hold on, please. Nobody would want that. So why should you go into a Starbucks that's doing that on a regular basis? What is the exception? The exception is when you travel in airports. In airports, Starbucks have kiosks. The kiosks only serve coffee. They don't do sandwiches, they don't do the other foods. There, if you're so desperate for coffee from Starbucks, I have to go off topic. I just came from my shul. I give a daf yomi shir in my shul every morning, and we have free coffee. So spending $6 on a coffee is just beyond me. But if you really want to spend $6 on a coffee, you could buy it at a Starbucks kiosk.
What is the difference between a retail establishment that you will not serve on Shabbat, whether it's open to Jew or non-Jew, and a non-retail establishment such as a mass bakery or?
It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. It's not something that you, especially if it's not owned by a Jew. A non-Jew is allowed to be open on Shabbos. So the first reason that we can't certify a retail establishment that's open on Shabbos, because it goes back to something I said earlier. Every retail establishment that we certify has a Mashgiach Tamidi. I can't find a Mashgiach Tamidi that wants to work in a retail establishment every Shabbos and every Yom Tov. So it's a very practical consideration. The second consideration is it's just not right that the OU symbol, what the OU represents after you heard Rabbi Howard, should be attached to a place that's open on Shabbos. And it also, and we've been thinking about this many times, it puts religious Jews at a disadvantage. That means a religious Jew who's closing his operation on Shabbos is at a disadvantage versus the person who's not religious, and he can be open on Shabbos. That's not fair. We don't want to discriminate against religious Jews.
How does that happen when you have a wholesale?
Now, wholesale has a whole different situation. There's no need for Mashgiach Tamidi. So that Mashgiach Tamidi consideration is not there. Because I would say well over 90% of the establishments that the OU certifies do not have a Mashgiach Tamidi. We have a Yotz V'Nichnas, and one of the things that we do request, and we not only request, we do, that we ask, factories are usually not open on Shabbos. So it's not an issue regarding Shabbos, but they are open on Yom Tov, and we will have Mashgiachim when possible, when necessary, walk into factories on Yom Tov.
All right, so I have two more questions, but then we can open up, and obviously, if anyone has questions, they can ask. So I'd like to spend a minute talking about kulas and when it's appropriate to rely on a kula. And I'd like to set the stage with a particular example. So a person's in a supermarket. Let's, for the moment, we know that Moshe had a famous landmark tshuva allowing the consumption of non-Chalav Yisrael products in America. The OU certifies non-Chalav Yisrael products. But let's not discuss for the moment whether a person should be makbid Chalav Yisrael or not. Let me set the stage in a scenario. A person's in a supermarket. He has Entenmann's donuts already in his shopping cart because the Chalav Yisrael ones just don't cut it for him. And he's standing now in the milk section, and he's looking at multiple bottles of milk. There's a bottle of milk there that's Chalav Yisrael, and there's a bottle of milk there that's not Chalav Yisrael. Let's say for the moment that the price is similar, and let's say that the taste is the same. Is there any heter for a person to rely on Rav Moshe's kula to buy the non-Chalav Yisrael bottle of milk when he can just as easily buy the Chalav Yisrael bottle of milk? And how does that apply to the broader use of kulas?
So to answer your specific question, it's really a complicated halachic discussion. Because when you speak about Chalav Yisrael or not Chalav Yisrael, why it's permitted, there's two ways of looking at that question. You could take the approach of the Pre-Chodesh, that the Pre-Chodesh's approach is that when we're in a situation where there are no non-kosher animals where the milk is coming from, there's no rule of Chalav Yisrael. So according to the Pre-Chodesh, there's no reason to buy the Chalav Yisrael milk. Rav Moshe is not the Pre-Chodesh. Rav Moshe is addressing the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer and other Gedolei Yisrael felt that the rule of Chalav Yisrael is a gzeira. What does that mean? A gzeira means that the rule is the rule even when the reason for the rule isn't there. So yes, there was a rule instituted in Sotah that cholov shechal va'akum, milk that was milked by a non-Jew, we need to be concerned what other milk he mixed into it. So if we know there's no possibility of adulteration with another milk, does the rule remain, or is the rule only as long as that concern exists? The Chassam Sofer's opinion very, very strongly was that it doesn't make a difference. And even if the reasoning for the rule is no longer applicable, the rule remains. It's a gezeira. As I said, the Pre-Shavuos disagrees. Ramosha is addressing the Chassam Sofer. And Ramosha is saying, well, there's a new category. And that's called cholov, as he really uses it. Cholov stam is really a second generation term. The original term that Ramosha used was cholov ha-companies. Cholov of companies, they're here in the United States. There is strong government control that farms that have cows on them don't have any other animals that could give milk, and therefore we don't have to be concerned. But Ramosha himself in his Tshuvos writes that that's a b'diavad. And Ramosha says that if you could get Chol Yisrael, use Chol Yisrael. So really the answer to your question is, why are you being lenient on Chol Stam? Are you relying on the Pre-Shavuos? Then you can buy the Chol Stam. Are you relying on Ramosha? Then you shouldn't buy the Chol Stam. I also think, and this is a non-halachic perspective to this, that all things being equal, the way you described the question, that all things being equal, if we will not support companies that are trying to provide to the kosher consumer a higher level of kashrus, then who will? And I'll tell you a story that I've repeated. You might have heard it from me or read it in my name. The last time the Belzer Rebbe from Eretz Yisrael was here in the United States, he invited Rabbi Genak and me to visit him. He was staying in Bar Park, and he invited us to visit him. And he says to us, you know, I've heard such wonderful things about the OU. Parenthetically, it was very interesting. I met somebody in Israel, a very big Belzer Chassid, who owns a winery. And he came to the OU for hashgacha. And it's not even wine that he exports to the United States, that he would need the OU supervision. So, but he obtained OU supervision. And I asked him, what do you need the OU for? You know, a small brand sold mainly in Yerushalayim. He said, I walked into my Rebbe one day, and I told the Rebbe, you know, I have this wine business. So the Rebbe asked me, so which hashgacha do you have? So he says, I have the Belzer hashgacha, I'm a Belzer chassid. I have the hashgacha of the Belzer Bezdin. So he says, no, you also have to have the OU. Everything has to have the OU. So he said, the Rebbe told me I have to have the OU. He immediately called and got the OU supervision. But the Belzer Rebbe turns around to Rabbi Genak and me and says to us, I hear such wonderful things about the OU. The people who are working in OU Kashrus, you know, parenthetically, the OU Kashrus department is the way Mashiach is going to look. It's like a United Nations of religious Jews, of from Rabbanim. From every yeshiva, YU, Lakewood, Tarvadas, Ne Yisrael, every yeshiva is represented in our staff. You only have to have three qualifications. One is you have to be a Talmid Chacham. Two is you have to be a Yerushalayim. And third, you have to be competent. Those are the members of our staff. So he says, I heard that's your staff. That's who your staff is. And it's time that the OU should upgrade. And that the OU should be Makbid and Chol Yisrael. And I'm a Chol Yisrael person anyway, so he didn't have to be speaking to me. But Rabbi Genak is not necessarily a Chol Yisrael person. So Rabbi Genak told him, we're not only here for the Jews in Bar Park and in Williamsburg and in Muncie that have Chol Yisrael easily and readily available. We're here for the Jews in Texas and the Jews in Las Vegas and the Jews all around the country that don't have Chol Yisrael readily available. And we have to service them also. And that's a big part of our thinking. The responsibility that we at the OU carry is a huge responsibility, because We want everybody to eat kosher. But if we want everybody to eat kosher, we have to make it available to them.
Okay, so I have one last question, and the purpose of this question is to inform everyone on the constant changing world of kashrus and how new questions come up that have never been heard before. So recently a new product has been developed called clean meat or cultured meat. And I recently saw a video by Rabbi Genek who was talking about the technology behind it, the different types of meat that's been developed, the initial thoughts of the OU Rabbanim versus the psak that came out of Eretz Yisrael. Could you please take everyone through what this is and how things stand right now in the OU versus possibly the rest of the world?
Well, nothing really stands at the OU because the meat is really not commercially available. So, you can't go to the store and buy it. And it's a very complicated question that really needs constant study, and really we can't give a final decision because nobody has really approached the OU and told us we're making the meat and this is the way we're making it, and now tell us will you be able to certify it and on what terms. But there is a lot of discussion with manufacturers of this product because they hope to commercialize it. And once they commercialize it, they obviously will want OU supervision, and that's why they're being smart and they're talking to us earlier rather than later. The issue here is there's really 3 points to discuss. It's obviously a much more complicated issue. Rav Asher Weiss from Yerushalayim, who we enjoy a wonderful relationship with, and is one of our Paiskim, has a very easy approach to it. You may not like his approach, but it's an easy approach. He says, if it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, it's a duck.
Can you just walk everyone through what it is?
Okay, so,
really explain.
yeah, so because for him you don't have to go that way. He says, if it looks like a piece of meat, then it's meat. So I don't care what it is. What is the meat that is being referred to? What they're doing is that they're taking DNA out of the cells of an animal, they're taking cells of an animal, and in a laboratory, they're turning that into meat. There are a tremendous amount of advantage in doing so. First of all, those who are concerned about the killing of animals, you don't have to really kill animals. Also, those who are concerned about the environment, there are tremendous advantages in doing it. But you did start off with a cell of meat. And since you started off with a cell of meat, the question is, it goes through incredible chemical transformation. And the question is that transformation that's taking place in a laboratory turn the meat from being meat out to something new? And if it's something new, provided that it was all kosher, all the ingredients and everything involved in the process is kosher, then that meat will no longer be meat because it went through that chemical transformation. And this is not an insignificant question, and frankly, it's not the first time that we have the question. Many of you actually encounter this question every year without even knowing, or maybe knowing. Diet Coke on Pesach. So what is the difference between Diet Coke and regular Coke? Obviously, the regular Coke is made with sugar or corn syrup, and Diet Coke is made with aspartame. Aspartame, one of the ingredients in aspartame is citric acid. And citric acid is usually kidneys. So now, if it's kidneys, and we at the OU, and I see most of the audience here certainly are Ashkenazic, are makbid on kidneys, how could you have Diet Coke on Pesach? The answer is, it's kidneys shenishtana. It goes through a very serious chemical transformation, and the OU Paiskim, this going back decades, have decided that kidneys is only a minig, and it went through this transformation, and therefore you could have it on Pesach. That's kidneys. Here we're not talking about kidneys. Here we're talking about meat, real meat, the cells of a real animal. Therefore you're dealing with a deraisa, and it's much more complicated. And therefore, at this point, the OU's position is that A, it will be considered fleishiks, and B, the cell will have to be removed from an animal that's a kosher animal and that was slaughtered properly.
All right,
So
yes,
it's
sure.
a complicated issue that I sort of reduced.
Yeah, no, understood. Rabbi Elephant will be around if anyone wants to talk to him, but the shul needs the room now, so we ask everyone to please exit as soon as they can. Bench, please, obviously, and thank you so much, Rabbi Elephant, for taking the time to speak.